introduce Libby. This is Libby, who's the Teleweb Manager over at Switchboard Victoria. Libby, take it away.
Thanks, Shamini, and good afternoon to all of you. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the webinar. I'm just going to share my screen, and we tested this before and it worked. So okay, that looks like that's worked. So this afternoon I'm spending some time talking to you about what the Rainbow Door is, about referral pathways and how you can get in contact with us, how the service works. As Shamini said, I'm the Teleweb Manager at Switchboard. My pronouns are she and her. I'd like to acknowledge also that I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded in this space, that treaty has not been recognised, and that there is unfinished business on the land in which we live, work and occupy. Also to acknowledge NAIDOC Week for 2020, that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thanks very much for that. Just a little bit about Switchboard. For some of you who may not be familiar with Switchboard, it is a service that was created in 1991 by David Sampson and Heather Morgan. David Sampson is a Scottish man who had worked at the London Gay Switchboard prior to coming to Australia, and he brought the idea of that switchboard to Victoria. So the service started in 1991. We turned 30 next year, which is great. We changed the name of the service in 2014. We dropped the gay and lesbian to become more inclusive of the people who accessed our service. And a little bit about my history. I did a training course at Switchboard in 1994, and I spent about 13 years as a volunteer with the service before I left to go and do other things. I've come back to the organisation from 2018. I came back to get involved on the program Q Life, and also to assist the organisation to set up its after hours family violence service. That was part of the consortia of With Respect, with Drummond Street, Thorn Harbour Health and Transgender Victoria. So some of the programs of Switchboard, which you might be interested for other reasons. We are the Victorian partner of Q Life, which is a national peer support service that operates from 3 p.m. till midnight every day of the year. We also run a statewide friendship and community connection service called Out and About for older LGBTI Victorians. We have a suicide prevention project at the moment that's working on a post-vention report and doing a number of things with awareness raising and advocacy with other mainstream suicide prevention orgs to get to raise awareness about the incidence of suicide in the high incidence of suicide in the LGBTIQA+ community. We also have an anti-racist program, a QDPOC program, QDPOC standing for Queer, Trans, Intersex People of Colour. We have a manager, Greg, who is doing a range of work on making Switchboard an anti-racist organisation. Currently, he's doing a lot of work with queer asylum seekers and international students, which is really exciting. Okay, Rainbow Door. So what is the Rainbow Door? We were funded in July of this year by the Department of Premier and Cabinet, Department of Health and Human Services, Family Safety Victoria, and some money from Federal Ageing Department to create this service, the Rainbow Door. So it's a COVID response from the state government, and it's a pathway connect and navigate a service for all LGBTIQA plus people in Victoria. So you can see from that slide, there's a few ways that people can get in contact with us. Phone, SMS, email. We do also have a PO box for people who aren't accessing services that way. We are accepting letters in the mail from people. Our service is open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week, which is pretty fantastic. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides in a moment about the contact that we've had with people since the service was set up, which we went live on the 28th of September. So from July to the 28th of September, we had about 3 months to set up the program, to set up the service. So it was a pretty intensive piece of work that we did. So I think one of the important things about the Rainbow Door is currently statewide in Victoria, we now have service for LGBTIQA plus people from 10 a.m. in the morning, and then factoring in Q Live, which is the national service, till midnight, which is, I think, pretty awesome coverage for people. So people can access the Rainbow Door from 10 till 6 and get access to information, support, referral, case management, risk assessments, etc. And after 3 o'clock, they can call the national service, 3 p.m, and have a conversation with someone who's a peer who identifies as LGBTIQA+, and, you know, go from there. So in the first month of service, we've had 872 contacts, and we identify contacts as phone calls to the service, SMSs and emails. So that's the total contacts that we've had for the month, inbound and outbound. And you can see the breakdown there of how people are accessing the service. Phone 50%, SMS, text 36%, email 14%. The SMS function has been really fantastic for a range of people, for a range of reasons. We know that, you know, a lot of the data that we see coming out of Q Life is that predominantly the 18 to 25-year-old cohort like to use SMS. They also like to use web chat functions. And for some people, that's about not being misgendered in the contact they have with a worker. So you can't make assumptions around the tone or the sound of someone's voice about what their gender is. And as we know, many people find it highly distressing to be misgendered in their interactions with other people. And you can appreciate that if you're misgendered multiple times a day, the impact that that has on your mental health. So SMS and web chat and email functions are really important things for people in the LGBTIQA+ community. It's also helpful for people who are hard of hearing, for people who, for safety reasons, are unable to speak on a telephone, and for privacy reasons as well. People may be communicating, contacting us, well, a lot of people at home at the moment, but also if you were to think they're in their offices at work, that they can send us an email or a text, and it's not clear to other people what they're doing. So that's really important. For some people with disabilities, with no ability to speak, it's an important function as well. But we also know that the phone is a really important function for people with disabilities. Some people aren't able to access other telephony or communication devices. So outbound contacts, again, this is the way we're communicating with people in response to their contacts, phone, SMS and email. So sometimes we're having multiple conversations, multiple contacts with the one person. and which is why the emails and SMSs are so high. Yeah, okay. Here's some of the presenting issues so far. This is not an exhaustive issue, but it's some of the key things that we've been hearing about from people who are accessing our service. So we've had a lot of secondary consultations from service providers, which is fantastic. We're really happy with that. We really love having those conversations with workers. So in the first couple of weeks of the service, we were talking with people who are needing information about support services for international students, visa and other legal issues. I would say about a third of our contacts with service users have family violence as a feature of the contact as a presenting issue. And also the need for crisis accommodation is really important in that conversation, and that is a real problem, as you would know yourselves. For some parts of the LGBTIQA+ community, there isn't crisis accommodation that's suitable for them if they're experiencing family violence, if they're fleeing family violence. So that's a really big issue. It's one of the pieces of work that the Rainbow Door is managing. It's trying to advocate on at the moment. We've had lots of requests from service users and service providers looking for LGBTIQA+ specific information and advice. So lots of requests for queer affirming GPs, queer affirming services, and you can see down the bottom that point around people experiencing social isolation. We've had requests for LGBTI friendly gardeners, electricians, plumbers, access to sex workers. We've had conversations with school teachers or youth workers who have been contacting us about the bullying that young trans and gender diverse people are experiencing. So it's a range of issues that we're dealing with. And in terms of referral pathways, I guess one of the things that we need to consider is that we don't have an answer for every question that comes to us in the Rainbow Door. And as you well know, that there are some absolute blockages in terms of pathways for people in our community. So sometimes the work that we're doing in that contact with someone is the predominant piece of work that we're doing in that contact is having that conversation with people. We might be connecting with someone who is reaching out for the first time. Certainly during this COVID-19 lockdown, we're having conversations with people who've never accessed a support service before and who have no idea about what options there are available to them. And, you know, having conversations with people often at the worst point in their lives to try and work out, is there, to do some creative problem solving with them to see if there's some supports that we can find them. So I guess in terms of referral pathways, thinking about what that actually is for the Rainbow Door, what we're offered to, the service that we offer to people who contact us, so service users, is information support and short-term case management. So, and referral, obviously, depending on what the need of the person contacting us is. It may be one phone call where we provide them with the information that they want. We do a warm referral with their consent into another service, and we don't speak to them again. For some of our people contacting our service, we're having ongoing multiple contact with them, and that's because we're keeping them in our service while we're waiting for another service to pick them up. So their referral mightn't have been accepted by another service, or they want to stay with us while they're on a waiting list to access an LGBTIQA+ specific service. And that's an interesting conversation that we're having with people, because quite a few people are coming to the Rainbow Door knowing about the waiting lists that exist for some of the specialist LGBTIQA+ services. And so they're coming to the Rainbow Door to see if we've got something else for them. So we are having conversations with people about some options that they've got available to them. And we know how important it is that people have choice about where they go. So considering who that person is that we're having that conversation with, considering the intersections of their unique experience of the world, what kind of service do they want? They might want a generalist service, if that generalist service will accept them. They might want a specialist service. They might want to go to an Aboriginal service. They might want to go to a youth service, a disability service, etc. So we're having those conversations with them and having an understanding of the sector, and I guess offering them choice. That for some of our community there is choice, and for some, like gay, bi, queer, cis, trans men, there isn't choice. And as I said earlier, that's a piece of advocacy work that we're doing at the moment. Currently, we're in the process of organising an MOU with Safe Steps. We're still negotiating what that will look like, and we are working with Safe Steps to get some more options for crisis accommodation for gay, bi, queer, cis men, trans men. That's an ongoing conversation, and it's a piece of work that we're in the middle of at the moment. We currently only have one MOU, and that is in the process with Safe Steps. I was having a conversation with Shamini yesterday about the idea of having MOUs with multiple organisations. And while in principle I like that idea, in reality it's not something that we can offer for a range of organisations, because we simply don't have the time to manage those relationships. But I guess that this conversation with you all today is about saying these are our referral pathways and these are our secondary consultations, and that we welcome contact from you. We welcome you as individuals to access the Rainbow Door contact details and ask us questions. But I guess in that, I want you to think about if you've got your Rainbow Tick accreditation or you're working towards it, who are your referral pathways going to be, and acknowledging that if they can't all be the Rainbow Door. I mean, it can be the Rainbow Door is one of them, but we can't be everything to you. That you need to be developing multiple relationships with other services and understanding those intake and assessment processes as well, and creating multiple relationships. And that's time consuming. Believe me, I understand that. But that's the kind of collaborative work practice that we all need to engage in. I mean, I think just thinking about the intersectionality for service users, you know, one of the, I think, most difficult things of the work that we do at the Rainbow Door is navigating the exceptions and exemptions of other services. And these are really sometimes tense conversations that we're having, and how your exemptions and your exceptions fit in with your Rainbow Tick accreditation and what that means for people who can't access your service. Yeah, so these are real live conversations that we need to be having with each other. And again, I've said this in these forums before, that as service providers, we need to think about broadening and expanding our ideas of who can access our services. and the Rainbow Door staff are really up for that conversation with you. If there are things that you're worried about, you're concerned about, you can contact us and have those conversations. But I would also encourage you to be in contact with Rainbow Health and to talk about how they, as a capacity building service, as a training service, can work through with you some of the barriers or blockages that you think that you believe are still existing in your service, or talk through some really key kind of practice issues that you're having, and that Rainbow Health can work with you around that. We can't do any inclusive practice training at the Rainbow Door. We're simply not set up for that. That is not our remit. But we wholeheartedly endorse the work, obviously, of Rainbow Health, which is why we're here and why we have such a good relationship with them. Just in terms of referral pathways, another thing to let you know about is we do have brokerage funding to spend at Relationship Matters, which is a rainbow ticked organisation. We have got money to spend to offer access to individual and relationship counselling there. So for some of the people who've accessed the Rainbow Door, who have said to us their preference is to see an LGBTIQA plus practitioner, counsellor, but recognising that there are wait lists, that they've been happy to be referred to Relationship Matters. And so we've had, in the last month, 5 referrals to that service. And so those people, and I think 3 of those referrals were couples, are receiving a service now from Relationship Matters. Whether or not they'll go on to access service in a specialist organisation, I don't know. It depends on how those waitlists are being managed. But also to acknowledge that those LGBTIQA+ services, they do have waitlists, but they also do triage and prioritise for clients. So I don't mean to suggest not to contact those services. That's not my point at all. This is just a real snapshot of some of the services that some of the organisations that we've referred to in the last month. So the data that I'm talking to you about is the first month of the Rainbow Door. So a real a range of services, some not unsurprising. Eating Disorders Victoria, I think, was one that came up in the 2nd or 3rd day of the service opening. They've just created an LGBTIQA+ online group for people with eating disorders, which is fantastic. It's an incredibly responsive service to provide during COVID, and we've had a chat with them, and we really think that that's a great initiative of theirs. So in terms of secondary consultations, we have heard from a large number of organisations from a variety of places who've contacted us, allied health workers, prison advocacy orgs, and I say that in the multiple, family violence orgs, housing, community legal services, hospitals, school teachers, youth and family services, health services, parents, a few parents of trans and gender diverse kids, and a lot of those services are regional services. And noting if there is anyone in the room from Gippsland, we've had some contact with service providers from Gippsland who were excited that the Rainbow Door has been set up, and acknowledging that there isn't an LGBTIQA+ specific service in that area, and that we need to pay attention to that area and to support them in the work they're doing. So in terms of secondary consultations, what we offer, so our helpline workers and team leaders are all part of the LGBTIQA+ community. They specialise in family violence and suicide risk assessment. They're a mixture of social workers and psychologists who've worked in a range of sectors. And so they're bringing all of that expertise to the work that they do. And we're working on a team case management model at the moment. I think we're week 6 of service, so that everyone is across all of the work that's being done in the service, and there's a shitload of information sharing going on between the 8 people who work on that line on Rainbow Door. Yeah, so as I said, information support and case management, up to 12 weeks of case management. The brokerage funding that we have with I've spelled that wrong, it's Relationship Matters, can go up to 20 weeks or 20 sessions, sorry. So there's some flexibility in that brokerage funding depending on the needs of the client, which is really fantastic. As I said before, we can't do any inclusive practice, so don't ask us. But what we can do as for service, for sector orgs, for workers, is you can call us and say, I don't know what to do here. I've got a client coming in at 2 o'clock or tomorrow or whatever. You can ask us a couple of quick questions about what kind of service might I provide to this person? How do I have this conversation with that person? But in terms of understanding how to make your practice inclusive and accessible to our communities, again, I will say that that's Rainbow Health's role, and that you should talk to them about that. Okay, do you know what? We've got to the end of my slides, I think, but I actually want to go back. I've missed out something. I wanted to talk to you about advocacy for our service users. And I think this connects in with the Rainbow Tick, and it connects in with Rainbow Health as well. One of the things that we're offering to the people who access our service is, you know, if that referral didn't work out for you, shout out to anyone who's done the WIRE training. This will be familiar to you. We're indebted to the WIRE model and the WIRE training. That, you know, if that referral that we offered to you didn't work out, come back and tell us. We can offer you something else. But also an added extra to that for us at Rainbow Door is, with your consent, we'll have a conversation with the service provider. So that's something that I want to offer to you. In the process of you doing the Rainbow Tick accreditation, that we, with the consent of a service user, we will come to you and say, hey, we've had this feedback, can we have a conversation? We think that that's really important. That's a really important advocacy process, advocacy and accountability process for all of us. And that's something that we want to offer to you. And I'd be really interested to hear what you think about that. It seems to me that it's more of an integrated service delivery, that it follows up and provides accountability to the Rainbow Tick accreditation, and we're really keen for that. It's something that I've spoken with Matt and Shamini about before, so I would be keen to hear what you think about that. I think that I've finished. How's that?
Yeah, cool. We've had a response in the chat about you know, that feedback as well, and like I said, you know, that's a great response. I would welcome it. We've had a few questions in the chat, so I'll go through them in order for Libby. And if people have any more questions, feel free to chuck it in the chat, or if you'd like to speak your question, feel free to say that in the chat, and I'll get to you as well. So the first question was from Kate. So what SMS and web chat service do you use?
Oh, hang on. Do you know what? I'm texting someone who's trying to call me. I'm in the middle of a webinar.
Why don't they know you're in the middle of a webinar?
Hey?
Why don't they know you're in the middle of a webinar?
It's my 4 o'clock.
Well.
What do we use? So do you mean the telephony that we use for our service? We use Air Call and Front Does that mean anything to anyone? So we've got a setup.
Nothing.
We've got the setup so that we've got an integrated system that we are looking at a screen and we've got emails, SMS and phone calls coming in all into the same space. I'm not sure if that answers your question. It's a VoIP system.
That does answer your question, or doesn't answer your question, let us know in the chat. Nicole asks, if a referral is made, how long before the family is called?
Okay, that's a really good question. That's a consent issue for me. We wouldn't, with the client's consent, if you called in or sent in an email and said, I've got my client's consent to refer into your service, depending on what's happening on the day, we could call them within 20 minutes, half an hour, an hour. Response times for service providers maybe 24 to 36 hours, something like that. Often, I mean, I think that if we're having conversation with you as a worker around, I've got a referral for you, we would invite that person to contact us themselves at a time that's, you know, suitable for them, so that it's safe for them to do that. I mean, there's safety considerations around us cold calling a service user, so that we'd be asking some questions around that before we did anything like that. You know, that's common practice for family violence services.
Question from Peter, do you provide crisis accommodation or would you refer clients to safe steps?
Yes, we don't have any crisis accommodation. We have no access to housing or transitional housing or anything like that. Yes, we would be referring to safe steps, and knowing that they will provide service like support service to gay, bi, queer, cis, trans men. They will have conversation with them, but currently they're not providing access to crisis accommodation. So the go-to is St Kilda Crisis Service for a homelessness response to a family violence issue. And so, as you all know, that's not an acceptable response, but that is the only response we have at this point in time.
Can I jump in on that one, though, Libby, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
We've spoken before at earlier Queer Family Violence Sector Network meetings about that we are working on a project to create crisis accommodation. We've got a couple of crisis accommodation settings who are very, very close to being able to provide service to people of any gender who are LGBTIQ, and we've in fact got a meeting with next week with one of those services and Libby to kind of work through some of that stuff. So pay attention to the Queer Family Violence Sector Network newsletters, and we'll be giving some more information about that as it develops.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. The question around is there collateral or a virtual pamphlet to share to promote this service? And that relates to another question, which was was your last slide available as a poster that people could place up in their offices?
100% yes. If you send an email to support@rainbow.org, I'm sorry, I just got rid of that slide. If you send an email, you can phone, email or text us with that request. There's also the website, which is beautiful, and a shout out to Plump Designs who created that website. Yes, we will send you a comms pack, and we do have some hard copies. We've got a poster and some DL cards that we can send as well. Just put that request in at support@rainbow.org.
I've just chucked the email into the chat. I think one of the last questions we have is from Gil. Would like to know more about what the case management might look like in relation to eligibility. For example, the age at which a child might be seen without a parent's consent. required and the type of responses provided during case management?
That's a really interesting question, isn't it? If we've got a child experiencing family of origin violence, that's really on a case-by-case basis, I would say, and I guess we would deal with that when it came up, and noting that on Q Life we're talking to 10-year-olds who are experiencing family of origin violence. We're talking to 10-year-olds who are questioning their gender and sexuality. So we are having these conversations. So does that answer your question, Gil?
Anyone else had any other questions? Are we all good? Okay. All right. Well, I would just like to thank Libby for coming today to do a bit of a short, I guess, presentation, but also just keeping us up to speed with what is going to be, a really incredible service, but also really clearly evolving service, as it's being created, and we can't wait to see how it's going to benefit LGBTIQA+ clients across Victoria, and see what we can learn from that for future projects as well. So thanks, Libby, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Libby, if people wanted to provide you information about their services, what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
They absolutely, so that support at Rainbow Door email is seen by all of our staff. So that would be the best place to send information about your service. And Gil, I just want to go back to that question from Gil. If you've got more questions around that, I would encourage you to ring the service and have a conversation around what case management could look like. For, as I said, we'll deliver a service up to 12 weeks, but also we're flexible around that. We're wanting to be responsive to the needs of the client. So, ask the question.
All right.
Sorry to come in after your closing, Shamini. I couldn't quite flag you. I had one more question.
All good. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today.